Good morning. As we continue to debate the waiting period that's proposed in Arizona by the legislators, some legislators, and we're still having in our newspaper, the Arizona Republic, a number of writers to the paper objecting or talking about their own ideas about it. And most recently we had Brian Howard, who is president of Planned Parenthood in Arizona. Now he's been represented in the paper quite a number of times with My Turn articles. And I want to point out once again that on the subject of abstinence, we have had a lot of denigration of this method. And when I was growing up, abstinence of course was preached by the religion, and most of the people, religious or not, all the parents, really put a lot of pressure on you to remain abstinent. Don't have sex till you get married. I was a virgin when I got married, and I was pretty experimental, and in fact, I was even kind of disappointed to think my boyfriend wouldn't press involvement a little more. After 3 years of going together, he was still stopping at a certain point. But I also knew that if I got pregnant outside of marriage, I would have to take a slow boat to China. My parents would be so upset. I remember my parents jumped in the car and drove 300 miles when they found a condom in my sister's boyfriend's wallet, which he had left laying around. And he was a cousin to my boyfriend, so they tore up there and got us out of school and said, if you're having sex with these boyfriends, we're not going to pay for your college anymore. Well, we were pretty indignant since we weren't having sex with our boyfriends, so we told him, no, we're not having sex. And I didn't get married until I was 20, almost, well, I would have been 21 in a few months. So this was a long time to be abstinent. And nowadays, the thinkers about abstinence just act like that it's impossible to ask this of the young. But they have also denigrated the role that the churches and their ideas about abstinence. They have denigrated the role that they play in society. Now, before 73, I can remember that the press had examined all the thinkers, the religious thinkers, and some of the best religious thinkers were even, I can remember even seeing like articles by Paul Tillich and others, big profiles of powerful religious thinkers. And now when legalized abortion came into existence, of course the churches did not stop believing this was wrong, and they opposed it, and gradually the big conflict resulted in pro-life protesters being denigrated as fanatics, zealots, and just in general discouraged. I have protested lawfully, peacefully, in letters for years and years and years to the Arizona Republic on this subject, and one letter in 35 years was printed. Now, doesn't that tell you that there's a big bias about if you disagree, if you don't think that legalized abortion was the way to go, and you want to explain your reasons why, and you want to point out, this is like saying, we don't want to hear anything about it. Well, this has been the policy for years in a lot of papers. And so abstinence was one of the things that got short shrift It doesn't work. It won't prevent anything. And as far as I'm concerned, even if we can possibly overturn Roe versus Wade and get abortion unlegalized, we're going to have a lot of preparation about what we can do. What we can do instead. What did we do back in '73? What did young people do? Well, I'll tell you what. In Utah, we were all little virgins when we got married. And my father was an alcoholic. He was a wild guy. But he still believed that his daughters should remain untouched before marriage because she might get pregnant, she might have a child. It would just be a horrible disgrace. And he wanted the best for me and my sisters. So I'm saying that when we shut out the thinking of a large body of people, which are who we call Christian or church people, and don't let their thinking be represented in our society through our newspapers, through our magazines, what we're going to do is we're going to dumb down our newspapers because we're going to leave out centuries of thinking about this very subject. Having children. I've read the history of the nuns. Women were fleeing to these nunneries that they started forming because they were fleeing childbearing, death. Everything it was like, and they would take they would take the vow of abstinence. And this began to have a very powerful influence to go to a nunnery. In fact, they would have their whole families take. Some even took their husbands and their children, and they all took the vow of abstinence. If you go back in history, you will discover that abstinence plays a big part in a lot of churches. And when you ask the churches to suddenly change their whole minds and say, we'll go along with it, they're not going to do it because centuries, they have evolved to this kind of thinking for centuries, which many times people nowadays don't even understand. They don't understand the power of abstinence when it is raised to almost like a holy crusade. Don't understand what people will do when they're absolutely believe that this is the way, the right way to prevent pregnancy. The right way. You would think that many abortions were preferable. So if you want to bring down 48 million deaths since '73 to abortion, you're going to have to change the present thinking about things like abstinence or get nowhere and have to change and let all the people respect what all the people have done or what the history tells us and teaches us if we want to learn, if we want to understand it. You would think, say, Brian Howard, who gets printed in the newspaper quite often, when I think of him, I think abortion. Apparently, when so-called church people are pro-life, they think zealot, they think fanatic. Well, I prefer to be thought of as a fanatic rather than associated with abortion, bloodshed.